Evening, folks. It's been quite a long time since I did the shirt talk. Brian here, Geomagnetic Earthwatch. Thursday, September 9, 2025. So the question arose yesterday, the 10th. What caused that brief period of G2 moderate geomagnetic instability solar storm that hit us in the absence of any solar outbursts from the sun? No CMEs, coronal mass ejections launched from any flares, filament eruptions, no coronal hole openings at that time. Well, if people have done their homework and include it in their playlists, you'll know or suspect what happened and continue to expect unannounced, sudden, unforeseen, unforecasted geomagnetic storms or instabilities. I will explain shortly. Actually, this is the third time. I've already done a couple of videos on my study observations and not trying to hide the process of geomagnetic reversals, geomagnetic pole flips. That in between the development, in between the excursion and the actual flip, is the very most important part that I don't see anybody else covering. And that is the fact that our field starts to develop a multipolar magnetic poles, which results in the field developing and fluctuating weak areas. So let's go through it all again. First, so this is a representation of Earth's magnetic field when the magnetic poles are more or less antipodal, opposites to each other. So the magnetic field, which is generated within the outer core of our planet, magnetic field lines, leaves the south magnetic polar region, envelops the planet, and re-emerges back through the north magnetic cusp. Normally. So our magnetic field lines are neat, organized, coherent, not tangled up. During the excursion, such as we're in now, the magnetic field lines become destabilized and weakened. Then we start to develop multiple magnetic poles. Now, how long this process takes, the process of the geomagnetic excursion into the pole flip, you can find a whole bunch of research articles. Some say it takes thousands of years. Some will argue that it'll happen 10 times faster, therefore hundreds of years. Very, very few people will say it can happen in the human lifetime. Well, it started at approximately 1904 when geomagnetic north started its beeline excursion from Nunavut, Canada, 1904. So 121 years already. It's been ongoing. And again, so normally we'll have a dipole, two magnetic poles, one north, one south. That is no longer the case. So right now we're in the beginnings of the geomagnetic excursion. And I now believe that we are slowly starting to develop a multipolar field. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So the magnetic poles are not truly stational. They can meander about, right? Magnetic north was touring around northern Canada, northwestern Canada, and then it headed to Nunavut, Canada. Then in 1904, it started its beeline excursion, heading towards Siberia. Magnetic south has already left Antarctica, however, moving at a slower pace, as if some sort of external magnetic anomaly is trying to keep it in place, SAL. So the magnetic field lines start to destabilize and weaken, allowing more of the cosmic radiation to penetrate, which breaks down the protective ozone layer, which is supposed to protect us from the more harmful UVC level radiation, which is going to result in more cancers, cardiac arrests, droughts, and fires. Then we start to develop two sets of magnetic north and south poles. There is the South Atlantic anomaly, which is a severely weakened of the protective magnetic field over South America and the Atlantic. However, it is now believed that that is now starting to split up into two zones, one zone going into Africa. So we're now in the process of a quadrupole field, two magnetic norths and two magnetic souths. I believe we've already started to pass that point. And I have not seen enough of this coverage. Not enough of the coverage that between the geomagnetic excursion and to the point of the actual geomagnetic flip, that point in the middle is the most important part, the most hazardous. That's when we start developing multiple magnetic poles, which creates multiple meandering weak points around our planet. Here's another visualization. So during the development of low geomagnetic field intensity, or during the transition between the different magnetic poles into reaching the point of where it's about to flip, we start developing these magnetic poles, which creates multiple weak points meandering around our planet. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about magnetic dipoles, which is a point on the Earth's surface, or the dip, or the magnetic inclination, the magnetic field vector, as the magnetic field lines emerge into the planet. So normally, if we have 100% field strength, and if the magnetic poles are where they should be, those magnetic field lines will re-emerge back into the north magnetic cusp. So for examples, when you hear of proton events, radiation storms, once it reaches a certain threshold, air traffic is restricted over the polar regions because of the radiation risk to flight crew and passengers. So when you hear of these solar radiation events, they have to not allow any polar traffic because of that increased radiation coming in. But as we begin to develop multiple magnetic poles, the protective field no longer protects the planet as a whole from the harmful radiation. Remember, the field develops fluctuating weak zones, which are chaotic. We don't know what area from one region to the next and for how long we're going to have these weak areas. Now, under each area, there's going to be a dramatic increase incidence in cancers, cardiac arrests, droughts, fires, because of the increased ultraviolet sea level radiation coming in. Sudden, unexpected geomagnetic storms from the solar winds in of themselves. So there's always solar winds in space. They're carrying the highly charged energetic particles. They're always out there. The average solar wind speed is anywhere from very low of 250 kilometers per second to around 350, 370 kilometers per second. That alone, without our protective magnetic field or weak areas, can be extremely harmful, hazardous, and deadly. So then becomes a cosmic ray chaos with the development of a quadrupole or octupole components of our magnetic field, which messes with the paths of the entry points of the cosmic rays. And remember, those restricted polar flights during proton events now will affect safe travel globally, popping up here and there, as well as affecting safe navigational and in-flight avionics. To support my theory, my idea that we're now developing multiple magnetic poles, just go back to April of 2025, April 28, 2025. Do you remember the massive grid failures in Portugal, Spain, parts of France, air traffic control radar, UK subway power failures, UK substation fires, mysterious, increase in wildfires throughout the United Kingdom, and so on? Do you remember all that? That's one area, that's one zone, from lower Portugal to the north end of the United Kingdom, and then over to France and Spain. That's a weak area. The following month in May, just over there, Northern Macedonia had a massive grid failure from their solar array. It happened right at sunrise. As soon as the sun hit those large solar arrays, they had a big influx of energy into their system. The safety mechanism shut everything down. I've seen that happen on my solar panels. I have 200 watt panels. They're only rated for 200 watts. I've seen them receive a lot more than 200 watts coming in, about 220 or so. Not supposed to. Anyway. So our technology requires precise navigation, is required, not only for air travel, but for things like submarine navigation, to oil drilling, to farmers' GPS operation of their tractors when they're planting seeds, because their tractors go for miles and miles and miles, and they use GPS tracking so they can have straight lines. You need a super accurate magnetic field model, which is now failing us. Now I'll bring to your attention the U.S. Space Force secret the X-37B, the mini space shuttle type looking spacecraft, which one of its purposes is to test laser communications and safe navigation without GPS, which of course needs a stable magnetic field. I find that very curious. I'll see if I can find a link and include it. Okay, so this is the third time I'm doing this video talk. Everybody else is just talking about the geomagnetic excursion and pole reversal. Geomagnetic pole reversal. But no one seems to be talking about what happens in between. Geomagnetic excursion, like we're in now, then hundreds of years or thousands of years, somewhere way down here becomes the geomagnetic pole flip. No one's talking about the spaghetti tangled mess in between with the magnetic field developing multiple magnetic poles everywhere. I mean, look it up, do your own research. Why is nobody else talking about this? That's why I think we had that sudden G2 moderate geomagnetic storm yesterday, which nobody can figure out why. Do your homework. Create a proper playlist. Don't deny this information. It's all out there. You know, how many airline incidents have we been having globally? Grid failures over that one area, and so on. It's going to happen more and more and more. There's going to be much, much more ultraviolet radiation hitting the oceans, creating fog conditions. Did we not have some mysterious fog late last year or early this year? Here and there and everywhere. We are being heated from below our feet and above our heads. The electromagnetic connection with cell to the outer core of our planet and the rising heat, to the heat, it's not really a heat, it's the radiation, ultraviolet sea level radiation from above. And as I've explained so many times, this is why I use the protective polycarbonate panels to cover as much of my food as I can because it's been proven to deflect the ultraviolet radiation. This is why all my vegetables inside all my green little housings do fantastic. This is also why when I water the soils underneath this, the water doesn't instantly evaporate. You see, it's an increased cosmic radiation, which depletes the ozone, which allows the increased levels of the ultraviolet radiation to get in, which, among other things, as I keep on saying, increased cancer rates, cardiac arrests, droughts, because it sucks the moisture out of everything, fires, and getting back to this, I'm asking myself now, when is this going to stop or start to fail? When is it no longer going to work? Okay, folks, I'm trying to get back into the groove here. I have some home issues. It's more important involving my daughter. But I'm going to try and get back as much as I can. Anyway, so once again, Earth is developing. Earth is in the middle between the excursion and the actual geomagnetic flip. The spaghetti tangled mess around our planet. Later.